Welcome to the Bird ID lesson for quiz number 5. We're going to go through the 8 new birds that you will need to know for quiz 5 along with all the birds we've learned so far. I did make a few changes um, on these birds. I need to go back and change it in the file, but just to let you know, there are 3 birds where I have checked that you need to know them by sound, and I am taking that requirement off because I felt like there was too many. I was adding too many with sounds on this one. So the eastern screech owl and the house wren and the red-bellied woodpecker, I'm not going to ask you to know the sound for. Let's talk about the eastern screech owl. So we've already learned the barred owl and the great horned owl. The eastern screech owl is a much smaller owl. This is more, like it says here, robin-sized. It's more like 6 inches tall at the most. When people see it, sometimes they think it's a baby owl because they're not expecting owls to be so small. It's actually not our smallest owl. We have another owl called the northern saw-whet owl that's even smaller. But they are sort of an adorable little owl. Here, this one's interesting because you can see that it's squinting its eyes, and they do this because they are a small owl. They're vulnerable to predation, and so they have a lot of adaptations to make them not, to make them more camouflage. One of which is, of course, their coloration pattern. They're uniformly sort of camouflaged with a molted gray. That's not the word I want. Mottled. That's the word. Mottled gray, sort of all over its body. And they actually can squint their eyes because eyes reflect light and it can give them away. And so they will squint their eyes, and they can actually have their eyes what looks like completely closed, but their upper eyelid has this little notch in it that they can still see out of even when their eyes are closed, and so they can be watching the danger even while they're protecting their eyes from light reflection and giving themselves away. So the screech owl is modeled all over. They don't have the distinct barring or chest stripes of the great horns. They do have ear tufts. We saw that before. Notice this one is a slightly different color. They come in some different, what are called morphs, which are different coloration patterns. So they can be quite gray. They can be a brown to what's called a red morph, which is sort of that rusty red color that we see in a lot of birds. So the actual color itself can vary a lot within the eastern screech owl. But that mottled camouflage all over, they live in trees, and they can be seen kind of everywhere where there are trees. I am not asking you to know the call on this, but I'm going to play it for you. It's referred to as a whinny. Again, we've heard whinnies with the hairy woodpecker and the downy woodpecker. This whinny, I want to say it's more owl-like, right? It has kind of that haunting owl tonation at the same time as the whinny, which is a little bit of a descending whinny. Again, this is not the sound most people think of as owls making. But let me play it for you. So that's the whinny. They also make kind of a trill sound. Here, let's listen to it. There's the whinny. Now, it's possible that you may have heard this when you've been outside in the nighttime and not had any idea what it was. That is our eastern screech owl. Okay, another bird with the word eastern in its name is the eastern towhee. This is a bird that I really enjoy. It's quite stunning. It is black on the top, but it has these rufous, rusty-colored sides. For many years, this bird, its official name was the rufous-sided towhee, but currently the ones that reside here in the east are called eastern towhees. And they are a very sharp, distinction between the color, unlike, the mottledness that we saw in the Eastern Screech Owl. Notice a just really distinct white-black rufous coloration. I want to show you another picture here. This is a pretty good one. These birds are scrub birds, so they tend to be in the lower shrubby areas, and they feed on the forest floor. They're very entertaining to watch. They kind of jump backwards and scrape their feet against the ground to kick up things for them to eat. So you do need to know this bird by sound, and it has a very, very distinct call that most people refer to as if it were saying, "Drink your tea." Drink your tea. They make other sounds as well, but that's the one I'm going to ask you to know is the drink your tea sound. Okay, that is the eastern towhee. Moving on to the field sparrow. Remember I said there were many kinds of sparrows and they can be difficult to tell apart. Field sparrow has some unique features that make it so you can tell it apart, and that is it has a pink beak and pink legs. Okay, so for the sake of the birds that we're going to be learning, if it's got a pink beak and pink legs, it is a field sparrow. Now, field sparrows do not have stripes on their belly. A lot of sparrows do. They do not have any stripes on their chest. They do have a bit of an eyeline and a rusty cap, but it's nowhere near the deep red rusty color of the chipping sparrow, and the eyeline on the chipping sparrow was dark and black, as you recall. So they have much more kind of a gray head with a little bit of rusty eyeline and cap. Let's look at this other picture. Yeah, again, you can see the pink legs, a little bit of a rusty cap going on, grayish face, no streaking on the belly. So you do need to know the field sparrow call. Another one that I think is fairly distinct, and it sounds a bit like a ping pong ball dropping under, when you drop a ping pong ball and it's underneath, it goes underneath something and it kind of speeds up as it goes, so it's like that's what a field sparrow sounds like. Let's listen. So if you're walking along and you hear that, it's a field sparrow. Field sparrow is a good name because the habitat that they like to live in are open field areas. They actually need open field areas with a little bit of some woody plants here and there. They're not a complete grassland bird like some others that we might see. That is the field sparrow. So moving on to the next bird, that is the wild turkey. So I would think that this bird would look familiar to you. I don't think you'll have any trouble with this one, but I went ahead and put it on the list because it is a bird, and it's a bird that we have around here. These are males that are doing the display. So when you see a turkey and they get all puffed up like that, they're displaying, males displaying, how sexy they are to the females. Males also have get the wattles and the snood. The snood is the thing that hangs down from their face. Let's see. I think I missed. Oh, it's not showing me that. Here's a picture. A close-up. The snood hangs down here, and the wattle under their chin. They always get kind of a purpley color. Again, that's the males. The female hens, not quite as colored. They don't have the big tail, and they don't have the snoods coming on the face. And you do need to know the wild turkey sound. Again, I would guess that this is not new to you. I'm sorry, I got distracted there. Gobble, 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 gobble was something that we learned from a very young age. Here it is. so that is the wild turkey. I think that should be an easy one for you. Okay, next bird is the house wren. So we haven't talked about wrens yet. Wrens are small birds. They do not have bright colorations, but they are very, what shall I say, emphatic vocalizers. They make a lot of noise. House wrens, things that have house in their name, are probably birds that are adapted well to living near people. House wren is no exception to that, so they tend to live in little, back of an empty birdhouse, or they can go in a birdhouse, or like I don't know, empty mailbox. Any place they can find a little spot. These are very small birds, very small. Think smaller than a chickadee, and they are brown with very, very, I want to say delicate brown patterns. Okay, so they notice especially the tail. It's almost like it's polka dotted, very delicate markings all over it. Look at where you can see the back side here. Again, they're brown with very delicate markings, making it very camouflaged. It flits around very fast. I'm not going to ask you to know the vocalization on this one. This is one where I had it down that you need to know it, but I'm changing it. But I will play it for you because it is a sound you might have heard before, and it's a very complicated song with there's no real pattern to it. Its pattern is in its, like it says here, a gurgling, bubbling, exuberant song. That's what makes you know it's a house wren. Let's listen to it. Okay, so that can vary a lot, but in that, and the length of it is important. Well, you're not. I forgot. I'm not going to have you memorize that, so I won't get into that. But we have another wren called the winter wren around here, which has even more emphatic vocalization than that. Okay, moving on to the next one, and that is the northern flicker. Northern flickers are one of our woodpeckers, but they're a little bit different. Notice how it sits on the branch like our woodpeckers do. But this one also feeds on the ground quite often, so you can see it on the ground as well as up in the trees. And this bird used to be referred to, or its official name used to be the yellow-shafted flicker. Remember, the shaft on the feather is that main vein, and notice that on the flicker, those shafts are yellow. And if you go out west, there's a very similar bird called the red-shafted flicker that has red, where our eastern ones have yellow. Those have been combined into one species with just two subspecies. So it's one species called the northern flicker. When you see a northern flicker from behind, it looks very camouflaged. When you see it from underneath, it has very yellow color on the feathers. So if you ever find one of these feathers laying around, you'll see this very bright yellow color on the underside. So they have a mustache, okay, a black mustache. The males have a mustache. They also have a red spot on the head. And they have a bib. Notice the bib. This might be the red chapter? I don't know. And very spotted chest. So they look quite a bit distinct, I think, from the other woodpeckers that we have. Their heads are much more gray with this little red spot on the back. Now this will be in contrast to the next bird we're going to look at, which is the red-bellied woodpecker. But red-bellied woodpecker does not have all these spots on the chest, so pretty easy to distinguish between the two. So that is the northern flicker, and I'm not going to ask you to know the sound on that. That's one I changed as well. Let's look at the red-bellied woodpecker. This is a fairly common woodpecker. You may have seen it at bird feeders. It's really rather beautiful. It has a red head, and so I always get asked the question, well, why on earth is it called the red-bellied woodpecker? My explanation of that is, well, there is a red-headed woodpecker, and the red-headed woodpecker is entirely red on the head, not just this kind of mullet of red. And the red-bellied woodpecker does have, let's see if they show a picture, kind of a reddish wash to the belly. It's really hard to see. The time I see it best is when I'm bird banding and I actually catch a red-bellied and I have it in my hand. Then you can see that pinkish wash to the belly. But really, it's mainly got a red head. It's got that striped back that is fairly common with our woodpeckers. It doesn't have any stripes on the belly, though. It just has kind of a pinkish yellow wash to it. So the male has red that goes all the way back, back to the past the nape of the neck, all the way up to the nares. Whereas the female, let's see if there's a picture. Oh, that's a juvenile. Here we go. Female, notice the red does not go all the way up on the top of the head. It's just along the back. And I'm not even going to play that call because we're not going to learn it. And then our final bird for this week is the ruffed grouse. So this is a bird that you may have seen around. They're fairly common around this area. You may have been, skiing in the woods. I think someone actually mentioned this in one of their posts. You're skiing in the woods, or you're walking in the woods, and suddenly you flush one of these, and they go flying up, and they make a lot of noise with their wings, and it gives you a little bit of a heart attack. They are a very camouflaged bird. Notice they're very mottled brown and white. Actually, much similarities in coloration to the eastern screech owl. But their shape is very different, right? They're more like a chicken-shaped bird. Any of you watch Orange is the New Black? The joke about the chicken that no one can ever find, and people keep saying it's a spruce grouse. It's because grouse really are similar in shape to a chicken. The ruffed grouse here, you can see the big, like chicken-like feet. They would be the size of a small chicken, though. They're not real large. And let's see what this photo is. Just another photo. Very camouflaged. They do have a dark spot here on their shoulder, and they have a white eye line, and they have a little bit of a crest. Let's see if we can see that here as well. Can't see the dark shoulders so much. See a little bit of an eye line, white eye line, and the crest. They do have also a dark stripe on the edge of their tail. We are not going to learn any other grouses, so you should be able to know a grouse when you see one. And for the sake of the quiz here, it's going to be the ruffed grouse. Here is a ruffed grouse displaying. Notice its tail is almost turkey-like, right? It's got that dark stripe. It's kind of a turkey shape to it. And when they display, they puff up their feathers around their neck, and they actually drum their wings against the side of their body, and it creates a boo noise. And when they do that repeatedly, it makes what's called drumming, and that's the sound that I'm going to ask you to know, because this is what you hear. So off in the distance, you'll hear this boo, 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 and it's a very low, you can feel it in your chest almost, and here it is. Listen to this one. Okay, so that is the ruffed grouse drumming. And those are the 8 birds that we need to know for this week.